All right, Micah, you show me yours and I'll show you mine.
This is the perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah. Another myth bites the dust.
Welcome to the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your host, Micah, and with me, as usual, the legendary Matthew Jarvis. What's going on, bud?
Oh, Mike, I'm excited. We're here in Las Vegas together in Airbnb. We're just getting ready to kick off an Invictus mastermind, which is one of our favorite things to do. And then we're rolling into our personal mastermind. We're flying to Omaha to go to the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting for our personal mastermind.
That is very neat. Very excited about doing that. I love these masterminds for many reasons. And one of them is that the transformational changes that we see in people's practices, right? In our own practices as well, I always get takeaways of things that I need to go back with my team and work on things, how I can improve, et cetera, because there's no practice which is perfect, which is why we name this the Perfect RIA, because we're in strive of perfection consistently. But there's some key things that every time we do a mastermind, Jarvis, I'm thinking, oh, well, we've already done this, so we don't need to do it next time. But then I think about it and says, well, if I've already talked with clients about cash flow, do I ever have to talk to them about cash flow again? Yes. Every time.
Yes. Same with guardrails, right? Every time I'm with a client, we're talking about the upper and lower guardrail, how this works in good times and in bad. So it needs to come up every time. So this thing that we do, and you and I joke about this. I remember when we very first started doing it, so we call it financial undressing.
Yeah.
And you actually kicked it off, I think accidentally. There was sort of a passing comment in one of our early masterminds about cash flow. And I won't go into those details. You'd have to be in the mastermind for that. But everyone paused. You sort of revealed something about your personal cash flow. And like there was this, did Micah really say this? Like, did he really divulge personal details of his financials? And then we kind of evolved further from that. And now when we do masterminds, whether it's ones we're facilitating or ones that are for our personal peer group, we start every one with financial undressing.
You know, and a lot of groups are really talking about how do you get to know each other sooner, right? How do you bond sooner? How do you open up sooner? And so they have the hippy dippy crap, which is,
that's right. What's your animal spirit or something?
Yeah, tell me about a childhood trauma or something of that nature, right? And I'm sorry if you do have childhood traumas, welcome to the club. But it's just childhood life that's there. It's not quite our area that we're going to go down. But what we found is by financial undressing, it opens up a state of vulnerability. But not just that, it's huge transparency. And that's one of the things that I really like about it, because you can instantly see someone else's BS.
Yes.
And Jarvis, it's not lying. I do want to draw this distinction, right? Lying has a malicious intent intended to deceive someone. Believing your own bullcrap is you've told yourself something, you've morphed numbers in your mind for so long, you actually believe it. The only one that's really harming is you, right? But that we can see it instantly.
Yeah, I want to second that it's rarely malicious. Sometimes there's advisors that are malicious about it, and those are just people we don't spend any time with. Usually it's that every time you told the story to yourself, you rounded up that number. Oh, my profitability is 37%, it's 40%, it's 42, it's 45, it's 50, it's 70. It's basically a 90%, 110%.
It's 110% profitability.
Right, 110, or leverage practice, 110% profitability. And so the financial undressing, first and foremost, it is to be honest with ourselves. Like you're laughing as if we've run into this before.
I'm replaying that in my mind, that mastermind that we had. It's like, I have no idea how your numbers work. And he swears he's at 99% profitability.
How could you not be?
And I'm like, you got 10, 15 other advisors in this room and none of us know how your numbers work.
And I've sold my practice 4 times. We've run into some characters over the years. So the financial undressing, it helps you be honest with yourself. But Micah, to your point, it creates a level of connection and authenticity. And I'm not into this kind of woo-woo stuff, but man, you can have some deep discussions when a guy knows what your personal income was last year, when he knows what your real profit margin is, when he knows how much you're paying your people or how much you're not paying them. That gets to be a real discussion.
You know, it really helps with your understanding of clients' vulnerability, by the way, when they're coming into your office and sharing all of this stuff. Right? Sure, it could be a little different for different reasons, but I mean, they really are opening a lot, sharing a lot with us, and it's quite a trusted relationship and a blessing that we have with them. In the financial advisor space, one of the reasons it's important is not to build that trust and that bonding, hugely important, that's there, but it's really about to say, hey, where are our numbers actually going to be? And it was, in fact, we had a mastermind in this location. We came back to the same Airbnb at a previous time, and we were all going through someone's numbers together, and they were up on the board. And as we were going through them, all of us could see the lies that advisor was telling himself, but them. And now we could easily see it and have a good guided discovery about, hey, we need to come around full circle on this because the changes they wanted to make in the practice were right in front of them, but they couldn't even see it.
Yeah, you've got to have that. And this, our whole industry and really just all of American society is against that. Like, we're all about trappings of success, right? So in society at large, it's how many Facebook followers you have or what kind of car you drive. Yeah. In our industry, it's all about what's your AUM, right? It's how much AUM do you have? And no one ever says, well, hey, what's your profitability? What's your revenue per hour? What's your take home? And so we have to peel back these curtains. Again, it makes a tighter bond between your mastermind, but it lets you really address what's the issue. Mike, I remember distinctly, I was talking to a marketing coach years ago, and he asked me about my prospecting numbers. And I started just rattling off these numbers. He's like, oh, those are all really good. And then I stopped and I realized those were all lies. None of them were true numbers. They're just what I wanted them to be. So yeah, I saw 40 prospects. Well, then if you pulled up my calendar and looked, there was one on there. And it's just this example of, I don't know why I told those years ago. I don't know why I told them the wrong numbers, but it's easy to fall into.
Super easy.
Super easy.
So how are you being held accountable, right? So I want to talk about this on the financial undressing side, get back to a minute. I'm going to take a slight little tangent though. One of the reasons that, so we do a lot of online marketing for, Shalansky & Associates for planning to better retirement. Our goal, help another 1 million federal employees retire. Thanks, Ben Brandt, by the way. So totally, I was talking to a client and I had mentioned that to him. Well, he listens to Stephen Jarvis and Ben Brandt's podcast on there. He's like, wow, that sounds really familiar. There's another guy that I've listened to that said he wanted to help 1 million people retire. He couldn't remember Ben's name, but I was like, nope, that's Benjamin Brandt. And I totally stole that from him. So
that guy's a bomb. Don't listen to him. No,
don't listen to him. No,
Ben's
kudos
a phenomenal
to
advisor.
Ben. But one of the things that whenever I'm reviewing my stats and my numbers, I never pull up an individual video that I've recently done and look at the likes, look at the comments.
Sure.
I look at them in big pictures. Now, why do I do this? It's not because I choose to have an ignorant viewpoint. I can get really caught up with the likes, the comments, how many am I getting, etc. And I fall into this trap of playing office. Now, when I get to sit down and look at things in context, I make better decisions. So at the end of the month, we review our marketing numbers. They're in a comparison compared to our previous numbers. We can see what's working and what's not working. And then we can make educated and informed decisions based on those real numbers. So side tangent about numbers though, right? And likability. All right, getting back to the financial undressing, we have some key things that we really like to go through that really helps us. So Jarvis, kick us off with that. What are those?
Yeah, so we start at a high level. And by the way, as you're listening to this, don't just do this in your head. Like, oh yeah, I know what that number is. Actually pull up your QuickBooks, actually pull up your billing report, actually pull up your client billing. In fact, we had an advisor in one of our masterminds and he said, hey, listen, my average fee is 1%. And we said, well, hang on a second. You said a minute ago you have 100 million in AUM, but you have 600,000 in billing. That's an average fee of 0.6. And the advisor says, no, my average fee is 1%. Well, again, 100 million, 600,000 billion, let's say it's 61.5%. It's not 1%. And so it's very easy. So don't just go through these numbers in your head. Literally write them down, pull them up from the real source. First number is, of course, gross revenue, right? What was your gross revenue either for the last quarter or the prior year?
Yep. So I like to have, starting off AUM, I want to have gross number. I always so previous quarter is always great. If you're just now doing this, do it for last year.
Yeah, ideally a year, yeah.
Yeah, one of the excuses we constantly see is saying, oh, well, I don't have my numbers updated. Guess what? You have your numbers for 2022. So start there. Yeah. Right. And then what's the gross and what's the EBOC? An EBOC is what we're defining as earnings before owner's comp. Now, this is a big reason we pick on the gross number so much is because it's slightly easier to figure out what that is. Right. And we define a gross revenue number is all of the money that was debited from a client account or the gross commissions that were generated. So if you got 1%, but then on top of that was a 0.5 point fee going to some other third party, that's 1.5% the client paid. Yeah.
And this is where people get hung up like, oh, I'm at 103% payout. Well, hang on a second. 1.5 million came out of your client accounts and 1.1 million came to you. That's not a 97% payout. That's a 70% payout. So what number came out of the client accounts before any haircuts? What's your AUM? And again, this isn't the number you're trying to show off with. This is just trying to be an honest number.
Real. Yeah, what's your real numbers? And then earnings before owner's comp. What we are defining this as is what is the total amount that you were paid. So what shows up on your tax return plus retirement account contributions. Why do we say plus retirement account contributions? Because that's really your money that's going into that account. You're just choosing some tax advantageous savings. Now, if you're like, well, Micah, I write off my car and I do this. Well, great. Well, then I'm not adding that back in. You could have some solid tax planning. I totally get it. Guess what we all do. And so we need a number we can do, and we need a number we can validate. What are numbers you can validate? You can validate how much is taken out of a client's account for a fee billing, and you can validate what shows up on a tax return. That's why we choose these numbers.
And they're less prone to manipulation. As soon as I start adding numbers back in fact, I was called out on this on a mastermind that we did, right? So I said, well, here's my tax return number, but $200,000 or $300,000 above that. I think that's what my real number is, right? And it's like, well, yeah. Well, how far are you going to take this game? Your copy machine, that's a personal expense that you ran through your business. No, that's clearly a business expense that you ran. That you can't add that back to the EBOC.
And this is a pro tip we've talked about before on the podcast. And Jarvis, I know you've taken this comment and used it with your clients as well. Whenever I have a client that's going to buy a business, whenever I have a client that's going to buy a real estate property, I always tell them, I said, great, because real estate property, they always make money, right? I'm using quotes. They know they do not. But real estate always makes money. It's the thought process. And they always get these ideas from now as Airbnb or Vacasa, or another rental that they're buying. It says, well, it always makes all this profitability, and there's a profitability analysis done that shows that this property is going to cash flow. And I'm like, great. What I'd like you to do is go back and ask for the last 2 to 3 years of that person's taxes. Don't got to do the whole thing, but I would like the Schedule E. And you know what? Maybe an 8821 sign so we can pull their return directly from the IRS. And let's see
if it was a bigger deal.
Yeah. If it was a bigger deal.
Yeah, definitely an 8821.
Yep. And then there's always a pushback. Well, why do I want the tax return? Well, very simply, no one overestimates their income to the IRS. Now, if they come back and say, well, it's different now, not all those expenses were real. So you lied to the IRS, and now you expect me to believe you. Well, this deal's not all of a sudden looking so good.
Yeah, even if we're splitting the difference, like, well, depreciation, well, that's okay. Let's just split the difference. But we still, side tangent, since it's our episode, well, we side tangent in every episode. I used that with a client. After I learned that from you at a mastermind, I used that for a client, and the realtor ghosted him. So that they had this profitability analysis. It looked phenomenal. It was slam dunk. It was going to pay for us all the stuff. You rented out 400 days a year, whatever it is, And so I went through this whole thing. I used those exact lines you did. The client, same kind of pushback. Why would we want to do that? So I explained it. We asked for it. Realtor ghosted them. The owner ghosted them. Everybody. Saved the client from getting a really bad deal. This is why it's so critical. I never had a wholesaler tell me that. I never had a realtor or even a CPA told me this. I learned that from another advisor. This is why we're so passionate about masterminds.
In that little thing, the tip about looking at the tax return, one of the reasons I love this so much when I'm working with advisors and I'm working with clients is now I don't have to argue about numbers.
Yes, that's right.
There's no debate.
That's right. You only had $12 for repairs? Really?
This is what it is.
Yep.
Right? That's it. Moving on. Same thing with advisors, right? When we're looking at your tax return, it's the number is what it is. And this isn't something to be embarrassed about, This is something to say, great, this is the line in the stand. How am I going to move this going forward? So it's really important to know what that EBOC is.
Yep. We also need to look at number of households, right? Number of accounts, just because we're trying to get a better feel for, we all get stuck, whatever dollar amount we're at, whether that's $100,000 of net or $1 million or $5 million of net. And by the way, these are not hypothetical ranges. These are all advisors we've worked with. We all get stuck at points and we get lost in the forest and we can't see the reason you're stuck is you have 800 households. No wonder you don't have time for anything. Or the reason you're stuck is you only saw 4 prospects last year. No wonder you're not growing. So we've got to have all these numbers so that we can see where we're stuck.
Yeah, really important. So number of households, how many times do you see those households ideally per year? Now the pushback we're going to get from advisors, well, this client I see this many times, this client I see this many times. No, stop right there. Your service model for your ideal client, the new client you're bringing in today, how often do you see them?
Yeah, and if you don't have a good grasp on that, if you're guessing at that, pull your calendar up from last year and count the number of meetings that there were on that calendar and divide it into the number of clients that you have. You've got to get a real number for it. Because that's again when I see all my clients 4 times a year. Well, hang on a second. You have 500 clients. You see them. That's 2,000. So you're seeing 20 people a day every single day? I don't think so. Or if you are, we've got another problem to deal with.
The Perfect RIA challenges financial advisor to answer the question, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Surround yourself with financial advisors who share your common values and goals towards success. The advisor is you. The time is now. Don't be like most people who fail to take action and achieve their dreams. Go online today at theperfectria.com and decide what type of financial advisor you plan to be.
Yeah. So these are things that you really have to look at. Next thing I want to see on the list is the fee schedule. right?
Yes.
I want to see what they think their fee schedule is. Now, the caveat is, when you come to our mastermind, you're already going to know this, is we put down what our fee schedule is, and then you've already figured this out. We've asked what your AUM is, and we've asked what your fee billing rate is, and we've asked what your gross is. And so we're going to quickly back into those things. Do these numbers jive? And this isn't to rub your face in it. That's not it at all. No. There's all lies we tell ourselves. There's all BS that we buy on ourselves, including me, right? I'm not exempt from this. No, And that's why we got to call these numbers out. And on our personal mastermind, I really like it. Well, I don't like it, but I like the outcome of it. When the other advisors push through my tax returns. On our personal masterminds, they get our balance sheets, they get our P&Ls, they get all personal tax returns, right? They get a whole lot of information. And then to have 4 other really powerful advisors looking at you and said, why did you do it this way? Why didn't you do it this way? How come this? How come this isn't set up? It's really powerful.
Now, Mike, as you pointed out, that's a really difficult thing to do. It's super uncomfortable. It's one of the few times I really get to see you squirm. It's just an uncomfortable thing to do. And there's this old adage, which when my practice was struggling, I hated it, but it's absolutely the truth, which is successful people do what unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. There are not many advisors who are willing to be this transparent. One of the advisors in our mastermind, he would send us video recordings of his prospect calls. We've made that offer a lot of times, and very few people have done it. And then he just lays it all out. He says, all right, show me. Where did I go wrong? Let's go almost frame by frame. Let's go through this. And his practice is skyrocketing because he's willing to do what everybody else is unwilling to do. Financial undressing is one of those things that most people are unwilling to do.
On that list, one of the things that I want to see is 10-year goals, right? Now, if you can't think in 10 years, you can only think in 5 because you have limited thinking like Jarvis and I. Go for it. I'm in that same camp. But yeah, what are the 5-year goals, right? The furthest out vision that you have, what are those goals?
Yeah, and put not just the financial ones, but what are your legacy goals? What are the goals for your kids? What are your goals for travel? What are your goals for impact on your community, on the world, spiritually? Whatever your aspirations are, let's get those on there. A lot of times we sweep those under the rug because we want to stay comfortable where we're at. This especially happens once you start netting a few $100,000. You're living a very comfortable lifestyle. Odds are you're making more money than anybody you know or anybody you grew up with, for most of us. And so it's easy to start telling stories like, nope, I'm good here. I don't need to make any more money. I don't need to be greedy. I've done everything I want to do in life. Nope, that's a story that we tell ourselves to justify being in this comfortable place.
Very much so. And then the old adage comes in, and I think it's true. If you're not growing, you're dying. And if you choose to make a decision not to grow, you are choosing to plateau, and then your practice will decline. And we have seen advisors that have gone through that. Now, we've also seen advisors that have come out of that and now are regrowing. But that is one heck of a ditch to come out of. So again, being intentional about this. And then Jarvis, the other thing that I want to see on here is office hours.
Yes.
What do you think your office hours are?
Are you asking what I think my office hours are?
No, but now I am.
No, you are. You know, it's funny. So I used to very diligently count my free days, my days out of the office. And I had a physical wall counter. I would put X's on each day that was a day of the office, and I would write the number, how many numbers that had been, so that I held myself accountable. And then other years, especially during the COVID years, I kind of let that slide a little bit. And I realized that I stopped counting it. And then when I went back and counted, the number wasn't at all what I had in my mind. So, how many days did you take off? Oh, all of them. Well, hang on a second. I looked at your laptop log and you were logging in every day. And so this is, again, where we lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves these stories to justify our laziness. We've got to measure this stuff.
You know, and this is one of the things, we got some pretty ambitious growth goals. I'm just talking on Schlansky & Associates side, on our financial planning firm. We got some pretty ambitious growth goals, which is really exciting. But then my wife and I have had to have some serious conversations about saying, hey, we're going to have to change some things. We're still going to be able to take a lot of time off compared to the average person, but I'm not solving for the average person. I'm solving for my life. I'm solving for my wife, my children, right? And what are things we're trying to accomplish? But we got to have some serious conversations about saying, okay, this is the way it was. Are we comfortable with where this is moving to? And if it's not, boy, let's say something now.
Yeah. To answer your questions on office hours, when I have my work days, I start at 8 a.m. in my whatever time zone I'm in, and then I go till no later than 5 p.m. And that's just, those are my hard starts and stuff. Well, my hard start is usually just, that's kind of when I get around to working. But in my mind, I just have to start working by 8, and I don't ever work past 5. The only exception to that would be potentially during surge if I'm in Seattle instead of home. Since I'm not with my family, I'll work quite a bit longer. But those are my hours, and I just don't go past that.
So lies we're telling ourselves, we'll let the audience decide whether it's a lie Jarvis is telling himself or a lie I'm telling myself. The reason Jarvis starts at 8 o'clock his time is because he's in Pacific, and I'm working at least by 7 o'clock Alaska time and pinging him. Therefore, he feels guilty and has to work. So in my mind, that's what it is.
Well, there is this funny story. Mike and I were working on a project together, and in Google, where we keep all of our stuff, it shows who's logged into this document. So it was a spreadsheet we were both working in. And I get up early one morning because we were really trying to pound through this project. I'm in there at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and Micah's already in there, which would be 6 o'clock his time. And I'm thinking, man, this guy Micah, he's on it. And then I'm in there because it was a big project. I'm in there at like 8, 9 o'clock at night. Micah's still in there. And I'm thinking, man, this guy. Then I find out later he logged out days ago and it was just stuck in that file. He's got a little servo on his mouse keeping him in there.
I have the kids running there every 20 minutes, move the mouse around.
Click on a new cell.
So these are really important things about to be intentional on, right? We're not saying that you have to have a certain ideal hours in the office. We're not saying you have to have a certain number of time out of the office, etc. It needs to be intentional for what you're designing. And several people push back and say, well, Micah, I don't want your surge schedule. Great. I'm not solving for your surge schedule. I'm solving for my surge schedule, right? I'm really saying this to how do we encourage you to design your life? We have advisors that run Surge completely different than us, but Surge is about intentionally seeing clients and delivering value in a time-efficient manner. That is Surge.
This is also where it's critical to have these real numbers, because then we can start doing math. A lot of us have these delusional goals. I want to go from making $500,000 net to 1 million net. Okay, cool. How are you going to do this? Well, I'm just going to keep growing my practice. Well, let's do the math on this. At the size of clients you have, this is back to like our rental jokes, you'd have to rent this thing out 400 days a year. You'd need 400 days of Surge a year to, in your current systems, double your take-home pay. That's not an option on this planet. So let's back this out. You want to work this number of days. You want to have this many clients. That means your fee has to be X, right? There's only just a couple of variables. What's your service model, which means how many households you can have, and then you can say how much I can charge. That's essentially the numbers. And then your profit margin on that, right? So we've got to have these numbers so we're pulling the right levers.
So on this, one of the things that, I had a conversation with an advisor why this is important, because it goes into playing office. He was trying to figure out what his fee schedule should be on assets that are above 10 million when he has clients that have more than $10 million in assets. Now, I don't have clients that are in that boat, right? It's just not my
Did
TM.
he?
No.
Yeah, okay.
He did not.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump to the end of your story.
Yeah, you jumped to the end of it, so thanks.
But
that's the short answer, right? Is we went to him, and he has none. He had none above 5 million. I was like, then why do you care?
Why are we
talking about this, right? Let's go focus on the clients that you do have. But he got caught into this spell of saying, hey, all I need is these massive, well-affluent clients that are going to pay me all this money, and it's going to be great. All I need is 3 of them, and the world's going to be perfect. And I like unicorns and fairies too,
sure.
But just don't have them yet. And so because of that, I need to look at saying, great, where is my practice at? What type of people can I deliver the most value to?
Boy, this goes to niches. Another thing we like to do when we're looking at client lists is start looking at demographic data. What are demographic consistencies? Where do they work? What are their industries are they in? What's their net worth? What's their complexity? All these things so that we can start identifying niches. A lot of times we're running to advisors and they'll say, hey, I talked to an advisor the other day. I want to start working with small business owners. Cool. How many small business owner clients do you have? 0. What connections do you have with small business owners? None. What value can you bring to small business owners? I have no idea. Okay, this isn't a good niche for you then. It's not a niche you can't do, but we need to be honest. If you have no connections in this niche, then you need to devote your life, and by this I mean you need to set aside 2 or 3 hours a day to learn from advisors who are doing that. How do I then bring value? Because if you don't have a connection to this niche, you've got to bring phenomenal value to the group to break through this cold barrier.
And so an easy example of that is, when I first got into federal benefits, I think it was 2005, I knew nothing about them. Basically, we heard about them, that it might be this centered area. I was looking for a niche. We saw this lady who was teaching a class for advisors on federal employees. And then I was like, well, I'm not really sure if there's a niche here or not. So my dad had several clients that were federal employees. And so I called them and I asked them what they knew about their benefits. And they didn't know squat about their benefits. And every client I talked to had a different answer on how their benefits worked. I said, okay, there might be some lack of knowledge here. But then I devoted a better part of my life to becoming an expert in federal employee benefits and really writing books on it, creating a huge content website, planyourfederalretirement.com, and really getting out there as an expert in this. So just because you don't know something doesn't mean you can't become an expert in it. But it does mean you have to spend a lot of dedicated time into this. And it was saying, great, I need to, and I love what Jarvis, what you said. The question was, how much value do I need to provide for me being the outside in? I've never been a federal employee. I've never worked in a benefits office. I didn't have direct contacts at the time with anyone at OPM or anyone else. How do I become such an expert in these benefits that I can help with that? Now, you could apply it to taxes. You could apply it to business owners. You could apply it to all these other things. But it's about work.
This, and I mentioned as I spoke recently, I speak at quite a few events now. I spoke at this great industry group that integrated financial partners that had me as a guest. And I explained to them, I said, hey, when you go to a conference or when you go to these events, stop asking people about the weather or their hometown or sports or whatever, ask them like, hey, what was the most valuable thing you did for a client this month? What's your favorite tax strategy to explain to your niche? Where do you think you add the most value? What's one or two phrases that really drive home key concepts for you? Those are things that will transform your practice. By the way, don't bother asking this of industry experts or wholesalers and like that. Ask them of real advisors. Hey, your last 3 clients, where did they come from? Hey, when clients ask you about fees, what do you say? These are just incredibly valuable things.
Yeah. Have you ever worried about missing an RMD? How do you make sure you have a great RMD process, right? I mean, these are wonderful questions that you can ask, and pick one. And Jarvis took this from your idea, right? Pick one and go to that. Now, Gabe and I, my son and I, actually do the same thing. So we were going to an archery event because we just got into archery, and he was a little nervous about it. So we took that same approach. I say, what's one question about archery that we could ask every single person that we chat with?
I love that.
And it really got us just talking to more people, getting out a little bit, getting to know them a little bit more. And it's, hey, we're new to archery and we're wondering about A, B, and C.
I know we're on a whole side tangent on this. This is how I network when I'm in a new group, right? Whether it's a new nonprofit. This is your example on the archery group is this is a way for me to gain friendships and not just be like, when I go to a new event, I feel like the total outcast and I want to stand like a wallflower on the wall. In fact, I want to just leave.
Is that because you're wearing one of your Vegas suits when you go to these events? Or is that a different reason?
It could be a Vegas suits. The people approach me on that one. But I can ask people, hey, what are you most passionate about? What's your favorite thing about this organization, a charity? Like, what's your favorite thing about this charitable organization? What are you most passionate about? It lets me learn from them in this powerful way.
Yeah, that's really important to do, right? It's about being interested, not interesting, right? How are you interested in other people? How can you bring that out?
Micah, I was recently talking to an advisor who we don't need to name his name today, and he was asking me kind of like, hey, Jarvis, you know Micah really well. I said, of course I do. He says, how can I beat Micah? Like, how can I be a more successful advisor than Micah? And I said, well, tip number 1, don't let Micah know that you're trying to beat him because he'll stay ahead of you, or do because it benefits me. Like, he's one of my business partners, so it's great. I said, it's really easy. It's really easy to beat Micah. You just have to work harder than Micah does. And it's not impossible, but you just, whatever Micah's doing, do 2 of those. And this is, again, where that financial undressing comes from. If we're being really honest and we're saying, all right, what is your personal development really? You and I did this last year, Micah. We said, we both fleshed out. We said, where did you spend your personal development dollars? One, I'm just sort of curious, is this an area where I should be? But it's also accountability for me. If I show you my personal development spend and it's all kind of made up stuff and it's $12, you're going to say, hey, listen, your practice is going to go nowhere. When you and I show PD numbers and it's in excess of 6 figures, and we're saying, here's all the places I spent money. Okay, cool. I can see what kind of growth you're aiming for. It gives me a target to aim for.
Yeah, and this isn't about a bigger number being spent. It's about being intentional. We're going to keep coming back to that, right?
Yes.
The financial undressing, why do we encourage people to do that? It's about being intentional about your practice, looking at the real numbers. Where are you dedicating your energy with your team? Where are you dedicating your energy in your professional development? Where are you dedicating your energy with your family time, right? Are you being intentional, or are you letting life happen to you?
Now, here's the trick with this. I don't think you can do an honest financial undressing with yourself. I just don't think it's possible. You need to do it with yourself, right? But we tell ourselves too many stories. We squint at the numbers. We make adjustments. We make excuses for all of those, right? How many of us have looked at our P&L and said, somebody must be stealing money from the company. How can the profitability number be that low? And then we go through, Micah's laughing because he knows it's true. And then we go through line by line like, no, that was me. That's the copy machine. No, that profitability number's right.
That's my credit card bill.
That's my credit card bill.
It is. Every month I'm like, who in the hell
who spent all this money? Yeah.
Right? Yes. And then I go and justify every transaction I make, which is why I'm not encouraging you to go back and look at where your profitability went this last year, because you've already spent the money. And my time machine is still broke. I'm mad at my son about that. He's lost our flux capacitor. But once we find that, then hopefully we'll fix this. But going forward is the only decisions that I really care about. What are you going to do now? Pro tip, and I don't have a lot of clients that take me up on this one as well, but if it's a cash flow thing, they're not quite sure where their money goes, have them cancel all their credit cards or claim that they're stolen and have all new credit card numbers issued. That cancels all your auto subscriptions, everything else. Now, it's a pain in the butt because I just did this, by the way. I just canceled one of mine and had a new number issued. And now I'm having to remake a decision on every single service I have. But instead of telling my VA to, hey, just go sign me up for everything, I'm like, no, every single time one comes in, I want you to look at it, tell me what the service is for, how much I've used it, and if we should keep this or not. But those things matter at the end of the day on your profitability.
They do. And I love this looking forward, not working back. The trick, again, with the financial addressing is finding someone with whom you can do this financial addressing. It does not work with a spouse or somebody you're in a relationship with. And it does not work very well even with a business partner because you're both sort of drinking the same Kool-Aid. You've got to find some kind of third party. This is, again, a shameless plug. Why we created the Perfect RA as a coaching program, why we created these Invictus Masterminds, is that it is so critical to have this time where you can really be honest with somebody who's also being honest with you. It has to go both ways, by the way. If someone volunteers that you can financial undress to them, it's probably not going to do a whole lot. It's got to be a two-way street. You've got to have a group of people that are doing this.
And you have to be willing to be uncomfortable with this, right? That's the other key to success here. It's not about looking at the numbers and saying, oh, that's nice. You have to lean into the numbers, and you got to bring up the BS detector on this, is saying, hey, I don't understand how you're getting to this number. Right? Where is this coming from? You could be right. I mean, maybe I totally need to learn, right? And I've learned a lot looking at other people's financial undressing. It's like, that's a great way to look at this. I hadn't looked at it that way. I'm going to make some changes, right? But you have to be interested in that finances. You got to lean into these numbers to say, hey, you need to explain it.
Yeah, you really do. Well, speaking of taking action, Micah, this podcast is all about taking action. And really, not to wax too philosophical, but this really is why we created all this. I was actually joking with a friend the other day explaining how we created the podcast and how we joked for several years that it was cheaper than therapy, which I'm not entirely sure is true.
Must be one hell of a therapist, Bill.
One hell of a therapist, Bill. But this podcast is about taking action. So I think action item number one is you've got to write these numbers down. I kept a spreadsheet. I still have it. I've kept it for years. I can go back now. I think I started tracking it in like 2007, and I can look back every year and I can see what was my gross, what was my net, what was my AUM, what was my average billing, what were the number of days I worked, what's my gross revenue per day and per hour. Now my hours, I just did 8 hours a day just to make that simple. And then what was my net per hour and per day. And I just watched those over time. I did add, Micah, for fun, what was my total tax bill for each of those years. I'm not sure why that was fun, but that's on their number as well. So action item number one, start that spreadsheet. No complicated stuff, just a couple of columns. Start tracking those numbers.
What's that quote from Thomas Sowell? Hopefully I'm attributing to the right economist here, is they should make all elections on April 16th, so the day after tax day, so everyone sees their tax bill, then they go in and vote. All right. I'd say it's a great first action item. Second action item is you need to get it with a group of people.
Yes.
You need to find a group of people, 5, no more than 10, that's in a mastermind setting, and be able to go through this. They don't necessarily have to be in your same industry. So if you can't find them in the financial planning services, reach out to us. We're happy to connect you.
Yeah.
But also they could be outside, but they need to be of the same mindset. That's really, really important. If I try to do this with some of my friends that are not in the same financial realm that I am, that are W-2 workers, etc., it's not going to go over well.
Yes.
Right? So it has to be someone of the same mindset. It's okay that our numbers are different, but that same growth-oriented mindset.
It has helped with that for our personal mastermind, that these are all people that are in different parts of the country. That was at least somehow I got over my head trash when we started doing this. I thought, well, you know what? I could, if I didn't want to, I would never see these guys again. Right? All I have to do is just not drop out of the text thread. I'll never see these guys again. So yeah, you got to have a group for that.
I want to throw out one thing on there too. When you're looking for the group of people for this, one of the key phrases to look out for, when you put your goals down, especially an income goal, and anyone comes back and says, why do you need that much money?
Immediate red flag.
It's a red flag. Right now, if they're just saying, hey, you're depriving all of your family time just to get more money, okay, maybe that was a legitimate question, right? But it is definitely a red flag that comes up about saying, hey, do you have a money phobia and a money issue with things, or is there something that I'm missing? So just watch out for that.
Action item number 3, which ties back to this entire episode, is where are you being uncomfortable? This is very difficult to do. It's very difficult to do it with yourself. It's very difficult to do it with other people. It's very hard to find those other people. It took me years to create our mastermind, but I wanted to be successful. I knew that I needed to do things that made me uncomfortable to be more successful. And so I looked for those things, and I hate them. I hate the discomfort. It drives me crazy. It's miserable. But every time I'm uncomfortable, that's when I get to the next level of personal and professional success. When I'm uncomfortable with my children, with my spouse, with my coworkers, with my business partners, with my finances, when I get uncomfortable, that is when I get to the next level. So if you want to, in 3 years, we listen to this podcast and still be in the same place, lying to yourself with the numbers, then do nothing. Just enjoy the episode and enjoy your car ride.
And still give us 5 stars, though. That's totally fine.
Yeah, still 5 stars. If you want to go to the next level, if you really want to, just like I told that advisor, Micah, that was asking about you, just work harder than we're working. Work harder than you are right now, and you'll get there.
Everything's possible. Jarvis, as always, it's a blast. Looking forward to this mastermind. Audience, until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think starts. Be a better husband, father.